know how this works by now. If you don't and you're new here, hi, I'm Mitch692 and welcome to my Sprout Talk, where I'm going to go through every expansion and every patch of Final Fantasy XIV. If you'd like to, then you can check out the playlist in the top right for all the previous videos in the series and then come right on back here. But for today, we're talking about the post-Heavensward patches from start to finish, so let's get into it. So not to hang about and waste any time, because these patches really don't hang about either. Like straight away, it's just non-stop. Every patch has something big happening in it. Thancred is back, here's Cryo, religious extremist, Aymeric gets stabbed, Shiro Fujimoto from Blue Exorcist is throwing a child off the roof of the vault. Seriously, am I the only one that can't not see that, or is it just me? But oh hey, Minfilia has been taken back by Hydaelyn, there's Warriors of Darkness now. So much stuff happens here that it's going to be hard to cover everything, so if I miss anything, like, please forgive me, but I'm going to just try and stick to the important parts here. But I'm just going to start with a slight comparison to the Realm Reborn patches, because you can see that they took a lot of the criticisms on board here about the pacing issues and the length of everything with those patches, and they just kind of run with it. You can really feel that for the most part they're finding their stride with how they want to tell the story of this game. And while these patches aren't perfect, ultimately I feel like they tried to juggle too much here, but it doesn't collapse under itself. I just think you can see the beginnings of it happen towards the end. It just manages to hold on to the very last moment. That personally isn't let the whole thing down, but it didn't give me the best of endings or beginnings for Stormblood. But overall, you won't hear me really complain about these patches because they are so well done, like they're so thematically dense and relevant. Which brings us to the first thing I want to talk about, because it's the majority of the narrative in these patches. So as we all know, the DragonSong War isn't concluded in Heavensward, and in hindsight, rightly so, because the trend of these patches essentially being a whole other expansion's worth of story continues here, and they cover so much and expand upon it so well that just ending the war in 3.0 would have done everything a massive disservice. And arguably my favourite part of this conclusion is just how scarily relevant it all is with the looks at the extremists. They're so well told, talking about loss and hatred, how vengeance just breeds this never-ending cycle of pain and death. But not just pointing out the obvious, this entire thing asks the question of how do you stop it? How do you get the gears of change moving? How do you set about something that everyone wants without anyone feeling like they've been dealt a bad hand? Ultimately, I think the story here lands on you kind of just have to suck it up to an extent. If everyone has done horrific things to each other in the name of justice, then no one either A is going to be happy or B deserve it. After all, the metaphor here with the dragon eyes and eye for an eye makes the whole world blind is here for a reason. But in the end, the war is brought to an end, and it takes them a lot to get there. We have to explore the mindsets of everyday people who's lost all hope and faith in trying to claim justice, in which I have to add, in the worst way possible, don't roofie the people who are actively trying to help you. That's not really a wise choice to make. But this first part is also about how people are wrongfully put in power. Emmanuel can and will end up making things worse, and how they need to understand and learn that their actions have consequences. They can't rely on others. Sometimes you just have to have a bit of faith in yourself and answer your own questions and do what's right. Especially when everyone around you is looking in the dark for answers and others are trying everything they can to bring an end to a conflict, and making martyrs out of desperate people is never the way to go. Then the narrative plays this off in an interesting way, because it holds your hand through all of this and then decides to bring Nidhogg back into the mix and ask both the player and the Phrasevolger, what are you going to do about it, right? What's the way to go here to finally stop this bloodshed? And I just think it's this brilliant way of showing perspective, and how that in the end, the only way of ending a war like this is by coming together to find a common ground, to find common understanding of people. And it's this fascinating look at not only generational trauma, but how do you deal with loss in the moment? Because we have this one conflict from two different perspectives of time. To Ishgardians, it's been thousands of years. The people responsible are long gone, but to Nidhogg and Phrasevolger, it's basically just happened a week ago. They're still feeling the effects of man's betrayal, and it's still fresh. It's a very complex narrative, and honestly, it's handled so well, and so far at least, has the most satisfying conclusion. When Alphinaud and the Warrior of Light go to rip off the eyes from Estinian's armor, and both Haurchefant and Ysel show up to help from the livestream, I know it's the classic cheesy power of friendship triumphs over evil, but let me tell you, when that trope works, it goddamn works, and so it's so well earned here, and it's so expertly done. It really staples Heavensward as a definitive Final Fantasy XIV experience. So far, we obviously have still a few more expansions to go over yet. Before we move on though, I have to laugh. CS3 using the ending of the DragonSong War as the ending of Final Fantasy XVI is just so funny to me. But it also puts a nice little cap in the narration that's been really prevalent throughout Heavensward. And the closing of the book, sure, it's on the nose, but it fits so well with the lore and the tone of this story. I adore that kind of stuff. But that's just one part of these patches, right? Because we also get introduced properly to Krile, who takes over from Minfilia, talking about the Isle of Val and the students at Baldessian. Just to make sure that you remember that, what would you call it? It's not a thread because that implies it's gone somewhere. I guess it's a crumb, an obvious nugget that they want to keep refreshing every now and then. And Krile is fine here. She doesn't necessarily add anything. It feels more like she's here just purely to replace Minfilia, which we find out where she's been this whole time and move on so fast from jumping to conclusion that she's not coming back anytime soon, if ever. It's honestly kind of funny. I like the idea of where she ends up. I think it's fitting for a character who spent their whole life devoted to Hydaelyn to basically be an ethereal mouthpiece, because staring at a giant space rock doesn't really give you much of anything. But I'm going to jump forward here because I wanted to end the MSQ part of this on a good note, so we're going to talk about Yida and Papalymo quickly. But real quick, it's time for a fun fast fact. Statistically, only 8% of you are subscribed to the channel. It's going up slowly but surely, but let's see if we can't bring that number up even higher and even faster. Because if you like games and anime, I got a ton of content on the channel already. You know, we've got the channel's anime podcast, Pro and Noob, where, surprise, I've started my friend Jared on an anime adventure, so check it out, it's great. I've also got plans for a load more other content, especially for Final Fantasy XIV, so if you haven't yet, hit the sub button, do man's a favour, but for everyone that is subscribed, I really do appreciate you. Now, let's get back to it. But let me just say this up top, I was really enjoying the setup with Yida and Papalymo. I liked that they weren't just repeating the same with Y'shtola and Thancred, that these two are actually out there laying low, doing their own thing and trying to help the people of Alamigo, and actually giving a conclusion to Hildebrand and how after the coup in Ul'dah he's left to just get back to his own devices. And you know, obviously this and the DragonSong War have a lot of parallels to each other, and it's really interesting to see how they apply the same lessons here when things are at different stages, right? Like, the people of Ishgard weren't really ready to start everything just yet. It kind of all happened overnight. But Alamigo and Hildebrand, Yida, etc., like, they're so far past that point that they feel like the great Eorzea at large has just abandoned them. But you get these two very different approaches, like one more thought out than the other, and one of them is a little bit sloppy. But that's not really what I want to talk about, because what really bugged me about this is Papalymo and how he's treated in this part of the story. Because his only real purpose here is to be a launching pad for Yida and her story, and they get rid of him at the first available opportunity, and that honestly sucks. And I really hate that I fell into my own trap of setting expectations for something and then being let down when what I thought I was going to get isn't what I got in the slightest. And that's exactly what happened here. I set my own expectations to be that we were going to get the Scions back one by one in some shape or form. Like, Minfilia being back but not really being back is totally valid as a creative choice, and so is killing a character off. But just to be 100% clear here, my biggest problem is I personally didn't feel like it was earned. After all, we begin Heavensward with the impression and that they're all dead anyway, right? That's what we're led to believe. And then we find out there's a chance that all of them or some of them aren't, and then we slowly start to pick up our own pieces. And just as soon as we get one back, they're instantly ripped away from us again. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's done bad, because it's not, right. There's another reason why it annoys me. His sacrifice for Shinryu is really well done, but it feels emotionally disingenuous. It's dangling the carrot, and I don't like when media does that. So going into Stormblood, I had a slightly bad taste in my mouth, like mixed in with a lot of good stuff, because the rest of this plotline I was just genuinely really enjoying. But with having said that, again, we did jump forward here a little bit, so we're now going to jump back to Alisaie and the Warriors of Darkness, because, oh boy, you know, this kind of concept is a risky one to take personally, because a lot of the time it's always ending up being executed in a really lazy way. And there's always an evil counterpart, or some slight differences between the two worlds is minimal. Thankfully, CS3 doesn't fall into this trap. They take characters that are only in the game via the trailers and use that blank slate to their advantage, and then do absolutely one of my favourite things in writing tropes. And that's take everything we know and with just a simple twist throw everything into the air and make you question every choice that's been made by the character since the beginning. And it's here where 14 and Destiny 2, which it's been a minute since I brought up that game, but seeing as that's where I came from before I landed in Eorzea, I had heard that the stories between the two were hilariously similar to each other thematically, but I never actually understood how similar they actually were going to end up being, right? Even down to the development, but that's a totally different conversation for a different video, maybe. But my main point here is how both of these games tackle the light not wholly good and darkness not entirely bad actually argument, but where as one doesn't really go any further than that, With the pattern that I've noticed so far is that nothing is brought up in 14 without getting some kind of resolution, so I look forward to seeing how all this turns out. But this cautionary tale of the Warriors of Darkness about how they done what they thought was right, they have this black and white view, that light good, darkness bad, and getting rid of one actually ends up being more of an apocalypse than they would have ever thought. So how exactly do you fix that? Well, for them the obvious answer is to get the help of the guys you just beat, so smart. But you can't have such an obvious solution in a world that's not black and white, and I believe that's why they use this part of the patches to officially reintroduce Alisaie, because let's be honest, she doesn't really get anything in A Realm Reborn. She fucked off after the tutorial and then shows back up for Coils and then back off again, and while Coils is really strong for her character, it's not accessible to every player, at least not easily. But they continue her arc here while she's trying to find her own reasoning for wanting to follow in her grandfather's footsteps. It puts her in a similar path to the Warriors of Darkness. We know tempering is basically an etherical imbalance in the person's being, and everyone from the 13th is looking for answers on how to fix that for their world. So it's kind of just a matter of being on a much larger scale, and the idea of you can't change the world without helping the individual first, which is already prevalent in the story, feels like it gets cemented as more of a core theme here that's going to get explored going forward. And of course we get that with Yida revealing herself to actually be Lyse, who's actually Yida's sister, which fine, like that's definitely a reveal, but at the same time the theme of save the world of an individual to save the world as a whole looks to be carried on with Lyse and Alamigo here, so I'm excited for Stormblood. So with the MSQ done, it's time to talk about the endgame, so let's start by getting back to where we left off from the last time with the Alexander raids, and I'm gonna have to say it, I'm sorry, I didn't vibe with the story of these raids at all. Maybe it's because of insert name here wasn't all that interesting, or because you could see where it's going a Yarmul way. I'm honestly not sure. But something just didn't click, so I felt like it was a bit of a slog just to get through everything. And I don't like saying it or even thinking it, but I feel like I might have been impacted by that for my enjoyment of the rest of the action encounters as well, because outside of Brute Justice and Alexander himself, they're all just kind of there. And it's a shame because after Coils and the Crystal Tower, I was really looking forward to these, but to not be totally down on the whole experience, it's fun. Like, it's fun that Sid comes along for the ride again, and the music in these raids is fantastic. That straight into the Spotify playlist. Like, saying it's fantastic is obvious because all the music in this game is, but that track's a highlight for sure. But the theme of not really enjoying the raids, at least from a story perspective, is unfortunately going to continue here, as I had the same feelings with the Shadow of Macaque, or however you say that, like the Alliance raids for Heavenswards, and again, none of them are bad. They're all well designed and the music is great, and it's cool that Diabolos, however you say it, is actually a raid boss as he should be and not just a random dungeon encounter. The music is really good and the cinematic nature of that final encounter is great. But again, the story just didn't do it for me. Maybe it's how ugly the design of Kate Sith is, I don't know, but that was tough. Fun, but tough to get through. And I know I shouldn't really be letting the narrative around these actually affect anything, but when they're so intrinsically linked, it's difficult for me to separate the two. But as I said, it's not that they're bad. I've had more fun doing them in the daily duties when they pop up than when I did them originally. But ultimately, I don't really have much to say on any of the Heavensward raids apart from that they're all fun to do. But if I had to put them next to Crystal Tower and Coils, the A Realm Reborn stuff comes out on top easily, even with having only done Coils unsynced. Now, to not end this on a down note, like, all the trials in this are great. Thordan, Nidhogg, Ravana, Sephiroth, Scales Lady, I can't remember her name. And then something demon dude, like, not Bismarck though. Bismarck missed the mark completely for me, but great mechanics, great set pieces, really nice mounts as well. I'm a big fan of all the birds, and thankfully mount farming only took an hour or two, and that firebird is well worth it. The Relic quest this time around is an interesting one because it swung in the complete opposite direction to A Realm Reborn, whereas the original was long and the whole point was to focus on the grinding. The Heavensward relics are way too passive. The end result is worth it because there's nothing else like this in the game, but getting it was just so much of a slog as for the complete opposite reasons of ARR. The narrative to it is fine as well. I just hope that this isn't the norm going forward because I'm not a fan of just passively collecting tomestones. But Hildebrand was another massive hit with me. I'm tempted to do a video on the entire quest line once we're caught up because so far there's so much more than just the funny haha quests. For a little bit of a break from the MSQ. They seem to always carry this thematic undercurrent of helping people find a way forward, fulfilling their dreams and their journey of self-discovery. And I also really like the idea of essentially live testing animations in the game so that everyone can see the limitations of what they're working with. And you're not just throwing stuff like that out, right? Actually giving it a purpose and having fun with it. There's literally nothing else in the industry quite like that I can think of. And someone who's always been a creative, I can respect the shit out of that, because it would be so easy for them to just hide this stuff away. But they put it out there, and it's one of the big endgame side quests, and it's fun and rewarding. It's written so well, and honestly, I adore it. But that's going to be it from me today, because I think I've gone on for a little bit longer than I expected to, so we're going to wrap this up right now. So let me just say thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, because I really enjoyed making it. If you did, leave a thumbs up and a comment for the algorithm. I read them all and reply to most, and if you want to see more, subscribe. Be sure to hit the notification bell. I don't upload that often because these take quite a bit of time to make, so there won't be any sub box spam. And at most it'll be once or twice a week, so be sure to check out the other videos on the channel. Me and Jared just wrapped up our second season of our anime podcast Pro and Noob. We're really proud of it, and it's something different. So with that, I've been Mitch692. As always, you've been great, and this has been another Sprout Talk, so peace.